have a plan for how this is going to work. It may seem like chaos, but it's controlled chaos. So I just want you to know that. All right. So we're going to dive into this message. Today, we're in this series called Travel Light. And if you're your first time here and you've never been here before, I would encourage you to go back, maybe watch a couple. First, if you like it. If you don't like it, I get you're not going to watch anymore. But if you do like it, then I would say go back and kind of try to catch up. We put all of our sermons on our website and are also on YouTube. And so you can go and you can see what's on there. But in this series, we've been talking about the world is not our home. The world is not our home. And the first week we started with letting go of stuff, talking about the stuff that, because most of us, we are carrying baggage like this. Most of us, we just have stuff. And if the world is not our home, why do we continue to carry the things that we don't actually necessarily need? We just keep going through. I talk to people, and when we open this up, I talk to people and I go, do you have anybody, and so maybe in here, there's some people in here, do you have a storage? Anybody got a storage where you've been storing some stuff? Some people have gotten rid of it, right? But some people, you get some stuff that you've been storing. And so here's what happens. Most of us, by the way, the average storage rate in our area is $80 a month. $80 a month times 12 months, $960. By the way, it's $1,000. That's a pretty good Christmas for most families, $1,000 in Christmas. But here's the thing, the stuff inside of your storage generally is worth less than what you paid for in 1 year. Amen. Just generally is how it rolls. It's the stuff inside of your storage shed, your storage is worth less than 1 year's worth of storage payments. Some of you, not everybody in this room, everybody in here, you're perfect. You don't have storage. You've been traveling lightly your entire life. You don't have anything. You're like, this message is for somebody else. But most people have their storage for 5 years. 5 years, $960 a month, or $960 a year, gives you roughly $5,000 for stuff in your storage that's worth about $500. About $500. Yet we hang on to it. We're like, I gotta have it. And so if we remember that we're not of this world and we're not, and this is just but a breath here, why are we going, I have to have that stuff. I have to have those things. Get the important stuff. Get a cloud account. Scan up all your documents and be done with it. The other thing, last week we talked about distractions. How often do we allow distractions to continue to dictate how we live? For me, last week, at the end of service, I walked off stage and I deleted Facebook. I deleted Instagram off my phone. I deleted Snapchat. I deleted anything else so when my screen time came up and it said social media, I went and deleted that app too. So anything that was related, and so all of a sudden, and the best part about it was in between last Sunday and this Sunday, the world did not stop spinning. It continued moving, and everything, and I found out that if I really wanted to know what somebody was doing in their life, I would call them and talk with them, and maybe hang out instead of looking at their highlight reel. And I found that I gained more time back. I also found that my phone ended up becoming a tool rather than what controlled me. And so just from my own experience, I'll tell you is that it is worth just getting rid of that stuff, just not even having it, and go, and just getting rid of it. So we talked about that. Next week, we're going to talk about control, because a lot of times we have to be in control. We have to be in control, and so we're going to talk about that. But today we're going to talk about letting go of bitterness. So a lot of us, we're bitter. And we don't recognize that we're bitter. We don't really see that we're bitter, but we are. We're bitter. Let's just kind of dive in here a little bit. And so if we look at this in Hebrews 12, verses 14 through 15, when we see, it says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. So then we go to 15, and it says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So this is kind of the key thing. See, here's what happens. Bitterness, when you have somebody who's bitter or angry or something happens, what happens is that it starts to fester and it starts to grow and it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Anybody ever gotten a splinter? Anybody ever gotten a splinter in your hand and you couldn't get it out, and so all of a sudden you're like, I think this is infected. And then you're like, well, instead of going to the doctor to go get some antibiotics and get rid of it or have them take it out, you're like, nature will do its thing. And all of a sudden, your finger gets to the point where it looks like it's getting ready to fall off. I know that none of you gotten to that point, but I have. And when that happens, I look at it and I go, if I would have just gotten rid of it right away, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. And I think a lot of us are in that position. If we would have just got rid of the bitterness, we wouldn't be angry about something. We would have better friendships. We would have these things that are, if we would have just got rid of it right away when it was really just a nothing offense, our lives would be just a little bit different. See, some people, it takes more effort to let go of bitterness with them, right? You're like, they did that to me last week or the week before. And so some people, it takes more effort. And for some of you, it takes effort just to let go and not be bitter. See, I will tell you is that there's some people in the world that naturally have this ability to just be bitter about everything, and they also have this ability to complain about everything. They just have that ability. It's the two go hand in hand, bitterness and complaining. So if you are that person, and I'm sure that your spouse maybe has thrown an elbow into you going, you should be listening right now. Because that's what happens, is that if you're that bitter, complaining person, you should be letting go of these offenses so that way it doesn't happen like that. See, I'm convinced this is one of the enemy's greatest tools to destroy relationships, bitterness. I'm convinced of it. Because the smallest offense could be like, oh my gosh, I got to, and really it poison our hearts, doesn't it? Like bitterness can poison us, and it makes it to where we just have this destructive sense, and it's just like, how do I do this? See, God wants you to love. The enemy wants to kill love. That God wants you to love, enemy wants to kill it. God wants you to grow in intimacy with your spouse. That's what he wants. He wants you to be, what I love is my wife, she just happened to walk back in, so it's perfect timing for me to have one of those good affirmative conversations instead of what I usually do, and here's the bus, and we're driving it over you. But here's one of those affirmative ones, is that every day I get to learn something new about her. And so sometimes it's not always good things that I learn about her, right? Sometimes there's things that you hear, like, sometimes, but every day I get to know her more and more. We become more and more intimate. There's things that happen that, it is nice. I'll throw myself. So I'll just use general statements. How about that? We'll just generalize here a little bit. So what happens is you get into a relationship with somebody, right? You meet them for the first time, and what do? You're like, I got to put on the best show I can. I got to make sure that my shirt has been ironed, my clothes are straight, everything's good. Everything's got to be perfect, right? And then about 6 months into this, you're like, they're not going anywhere really fast. I mean, I'd have to do something pretty bad to make them go away. Like I'd have to lie or cheat or do something along those lines. I'd have to do something that wouldn't be very pleasant. So we get a little more comfortable, right? And then all of a sudden, about a year into it, we get really comfortable. And for us guys, we're just going to start farting all the time, And so, right? Isn't that what happens? And sometimes it happens a little faster. They get real comfortable, like 5 minutes into the date. You're like, hey, dude, what was... It's like that, huh? Are we good? But you get to know one another. You get more and more intimate. And so as my wife has started to allow walls to come down, I learn more and more stuff about her. I learn more and more. And what happens is we allow things to interfere with that. We allow things to interfere with our relationships that create this root of bitterness. And instead of actually going, I get to learn more and become more intimate, we go, oh my God, she smacks her lips when she eats. She doesn't do that, by the way. I'm just using general, because that would drive me nuts. By the way, you would be like, oh my God, But that was one of those things, like every time you'd be like, oh my, it would start creating some bitterness, right? And every time you sat across from them at a dinner table, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to rip your lips off. Maybe it's not just bitterness. Maybe it becomes like full-blown anger, but see, it interferes when we don't let it go, and we go, well, God designed her that way. He made her perfect just like that. And I have to learn to love that. It's really hard to learn how to love that, but you see, the enemy wants to destroy that intimacy. Instead of learning to go, hey, I can overlook those small offenses and I can learn to love that person, whatever those are, whatever that looks like, the enemy tries to interfere with that and destroy that intimacy. That's what happens. See, God wants you to trust your spouse, but bitterness will make it to where the enemy easily comes in and steal that trust. That's what happens. The enemy will come in and be like, oh, did he really say that? And is he really doing this? Or is she really doing this? Or who's she texting? Who's he on the phone with? What's going on here? And so that's what happens, and that bitterness does this. And see, what happens is the enemy tries to plant that seed of offense, and it creates a root of bitterness. So let's start someplace small, right? So for some of you guys who haven't gotten rid of Instagram, Facebook, or any of those things, you follow somebody on Instagram. They follow you back. For a while, they like every post that you put out there. Every picture you put, they like it, comment on it. Then all of a sudden, it falls off. They stop doing those things. They stop participating. They stop looking at it. And so you start going, what's wrong with that person? You send them a text message. And then you see the bubbles like they've seen it. A little bubble pops up. Hey, they're getting ready to respond. But then they don't respond. And then all of a sudden, maybe it's a relative and you're at the Christmas meal and you're sitting there and you're staring them down and you go, what's your problem? And instead of them being able to go, I'm busy, I have a life that involves more than my cell phone, you go, you didn't like my Instagram post. Really? You're angry about that? You're angry about, whatever it is? See, and we allow those things to be what grows. Those little things turn into big things. The enemy wants to lie to you, to deceive you, and really make you believe that people are talking bad about you. You walk away going, I feel like people are talking about me behind my back. That's what the enemy wants you to believe. I'm going to tell you that most people do talk about you behind your back. I'm going to let you know that right now. They do. And so it's up to you how you're going to respond about it. You have to make a decision how you're going to respond. You can be, I'm going to be upset about this. I'm always going to be upset here. But really, you have to make that decision how you're going to respond. Because I just looked at it and go, they're going to talk about me, so I'm going to give them good things to talk about rather than my negative attitude. And I have a negative attitude. I do. And so I have to look at that and go, how do we take this and move forward? And sometimes your relatives, especially at Christmas time, are always critical, right? You ever have those relatives that are always critical? They're like, you're never going to be a good mom. You're never going to be a good dad. You suck at this. You have this go. Why aren't you married yet? Why are you married to that guy or that girl? I had those things. I did. I looked at it, and my wife, for a long time, hated my mom. And then she died. My mom did. And she was like, I like her now. But it literally there's that seed of bitterness that can fester and grow bigger and bigger and bigger. See, here's the thing is that one of those big things, and if you're taking notes, and if you got a bulletin, you're following along, or you're on our app, or whatever, however you're in this, you can't control what people do, but you can control how you respond. You can't control what people do, but you can control how you respond. But my wife always tells me, you're making me angry. That's what she'll tell me, because I have a natural ability to make her angry. God gave me that special ability. He said, turn it on Melissa, there you go. And but I tell her all the time, she goes, you're making me angry. And my response to that is, I'm not making you angry. You're choosing to respond with anger. That just makes her more angry, by the way. But it is, yeah. Calm down. No. But what happens is, it's the true thing, is that you choose how you respond. If we look at what Jesus says if you get slapped, what does he say? Turn the other cheek and take another one on that side. He doesn't say what to do after that. He doesn't say twice, But the thing is that he says it's your choice how you respond. Because usually if somebody slaps you, your first response is, it's on. You've declared war. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's no longer a thumb war. It's fist. And so when we get to that mindset and we go in that direction, we really have this option of how we're going to respond to things. It can be a response of forgiveness, or it can be a response of anger. See, I will tell you, and so with Christmas, I want to kind of be timely about this. With Christmas, when times are good, Christmas makes things even feel better, right? When times are good and everything's perfect, but when times are not good and there's stress, all the tension seems to come out of it, right? The family tension seems to come up, the relational hurts happen, the disappointments are magnified. And see, you start to feel lonely, and you start to feel all those things that are coming up and broken, and it often Christmas time seems more painful. You know, it's like we look at this and it just gets more and more painful. See, I will tell you is that over the next week, many of you will have a God-given opportunity to share his love with someone that's most important, that's some of the most important, or someone that are some of the most important people in your life. You will get an opportunity to share, love. But also, I promise you this week, your enemy will likely try to plant a seed of offense that will create a root of bitterness. That will happen. You'll have an opportunity to share love. You'll also have an opportunity to start and plant a root of bitterness. And so you have to realize that you can't control what people do, but you can control if you allow that root to take growth in your heart. You have that ability to go, this is what I want. See, here's the thing. The problem with bitterness, there's really two problems. Bitterness has a dangerous root. So bitterness has a dangerous root. And so in Hebrews 12:15, see to it no bitter root grows up to cause trouble. What do we know about the root of bitterness? What do we know here? And so just think about roots in this. Roots grow underground, right? How many plants do you see that actually the roots start growing up above ground? It's very few. Most of the time, roots grow underground. And so, other words, bitterness, most people don't see it starting, right? I might offend, and I'll use my wife is in the front row, so I'll offend her real quick. And I'll quote unquote offend her. And so I might say something, and I might offend her, right? She might have complete offense right now. Here's the thing, and she might be offended right now because I'm talking right here. But what happens is that sometimes I'll have no idea I offended her. I have no idea, and I have no idea that the root of offense has already been planted until tonight when I'm sitting there trying to talk to her at the dinner table. She's going to go, do you remember what you said this morning on stage? Are we talking about this? We're talking 8 hours later? Is that what we're talking about? But so sometimes we have no idea. Or like for most guys, we go, hey, babe, let's go upstairs and let's go have some us time. And she goes, are you kidding me? After what you said? You're like, wait a minute. What? What are you talking about? Because like us guys, you understand is that our minds are like we might say something, but we've already kicked that can down the road. We're on to the next subject. Yeah. We're not sitting there and hanging on to it. You never hear a guy going, I'm thinking about what I said just 5 minutes ago. Never. By the way, never has that statement ever come out of a man's mouth until just now. And so when you think about that, you're the only one that's festering on that fence. Nobody else is festering on that fence, just you. Just you. And until it comes time for us to be friendly. And then you're like, oh no, now it's your problem again. And you have to remind us what we did. Do you remember when you said this? No. Well, let me remind you. Let me give you all the details. You did it at 10:42 a.m., and this is how you said it, and this is what came out of your mouth, and you were wearing this clothing, and you're like, wow, awesome details. But as soon as you ask her something that's important to you, she'll be like, I don't know. But she remembers that offense because that root has taken hold. And it started to grow, and over that 8-hour period, it festered and got bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden, it became the biggest weed ever in your front yard. You just didn't notice it until dinner time. You didn't see it. So, sometimes I share stories about myself that some people find that makes me kind of, he's really relatable. Anybody in here get road rage? Anybody? Just put my hand up there. I'll give you a story. The person's not here. They stopped attending our church a while back. But I was driving in my car. I got in my car, got to a stop sign, and we had one of those moments where we waved each other on, right? We were like, no, you go. And he was like, no, you go. And I was like, no, really, you go. And then he didn't go, and so I started to drive. He started to drive at the same time. And so what I got as he cut me off, right? Because he cut me off, and he flipped me off as he cut me off. I go, and I was, all of a sudden, I was like, I got to take care of this. I got to, So I stomp on the gas. I make a U-turn right in the middle of this four-way intersection. It was obviously already illegal. And so I come speeding up behind the guy. And I didn't know it was a guy at this point. I come speeding all the way up on him, and I'm like tailgating them. And if they would have flicked the booger out, it would have landed on the windshield. It wouldn't have been a problem. And so what happens is I pull up next to them, and I look over, and they attend this church. And they look at me, and I look at them, and I go, hey, how you doing? I love you. But they're not here today, which makes it much easier to share that story. But I will tell you is that sometimes we do something, and we don't realize the people that we're actually doing it to. We have no idea. We have no idea how we allow that affect us, and how. Do you know that may have been the reason why that person stopped attending? Because I did something that was kind of crazy. I flipped a U-turn, did 65 miles an hour up Claybank. I mean, it's like, do you think that person maybe looked at him and go, he has some issues. I need to go to some place where the pastor at least makes it seem like he doesn't have any issues. So, in your personal relationships, that we tend to do that as well. We go kind of crazy, and then our spouse goes, ooh, what did I do? Did I marry the right person? And see, here's the thing. In 1 Corinthians 13, anybody ever gone to a wedding and you've heard this love is kind, love is patient, love? How about this line that most of us, we just tend to go, I'm not really agreeing with this statement. Love keeps no record of wrongs. That's what it says. Love keeps no record of wrongs. The problem is, I've already said, and you guys laughed at my joke saying that you have the exact details of the wrongs. Like, I could ask my wife about last week. I can't tell you what we had for dinner all of last week, but I can tell you every time I offended her, because just ask her. She would have the list of wrongs. She'd be like, you did this, you did this, you did this, you said this, and then you called my name a way that I didn't really appreciate. But she would have a list of that. But see, that's the problem, is that we keep a list and a record of the wrongs. Rather than, it's easier for us to identify the wrongs than it is just to identify the rights. You have to think back and you have to go, when was the last time we were really happy? And it could have been 5 minutes ago, and you're like, oh, I don't understand that. We miss a lot of those moments. That's why we create photos of them, right? Isn't that why we take photos? We take pictures because we want to have an altar to go back to, memories. We take a photo and we go, look, we're out, we're out having a good time doing this, or we're out doing this, or we have this going on. Because we want to be able to refer to that at some point. The problem is when we're in the middle of that argument of talking about offenses and those wrongs, and we don't ever look back at those good times. We're looking there, sitting there going, I'm so angry at him. We don't ever go back and be like, oh, but look, we had such a good time last night. Or we had such a good time in Hawaii. We don't ever look at those things. We go, nope, really pissed off right now. And we stick with it. And that's that dangerous root. We see it starting right there. See, and then the other thing is, bitterness produces a poisonous fruit. So bitterness produces a poisonous fruit. In Hebrews, and we're kind of going back and forth to this Hebrews 12:15. It says, see to it that no bitter root grows up and causes trouble to defy many. Because it produces more. Because what happens, what do? We argue about it. We'll argue about that offense. See, or a bitter person can destroy a life group. So a group, you can have a group started and a bitter person shows up and goes, this sucks. This is always bad. He always runs late. You might have somebody right now in church going, why do I have to be here? He's kind of funny, but he ain't real funny. Or you might have somebody that you work with and you go, they make your workplace miserable. You ever work with anybody who's bitter and it's just like, man, if that guy or girl or that person wasn't here, this place would be awesome. See, the bad part is my staff, it's me. You know. And a bitter person can destroy a family. Where's Jermaine at? She's around here someplace. Oh, she's out there. She's out putting out fires. I'm sure she's listening. And I know some of you are going, I hope so-and-so is listening to this. I know that you are. I know that some of you are going, I wish that I would have heard this maybe a week ago. I could have changed something and something would have been different. But see, here's the problem is that that even that root of bitterness makes it easy to point the finger. That root of bitterness makes it easy to go, let me just point the finger over here. But the problem is, bitterness is one of the hardest things to see in the mirror. When you look at the mirror, it's very hard to see your own bitterness. What happens is, we tend to justify why we feel that way. We get bitter and then we justify that feeling. I'm only angry because of what they did. I'm only bitter because of this. I only have this going on. And if we aren't careful, some of us, we tend to go, we celebrate the love of Christ while hating someone in our hearts. We tend to have this thing where we celebrate the love of Christ and we hate somebody with our hearts. We receive God's grace, but we're unwilling to share it, and we hide it from those around us. And so we have to look at this. And so I'll ask you to take a moment and honestly ask, do you have a root of bitterness that's starting to grow in your heart? Or has it already been planted? Are those things? And so are you holding a grudge? Do you have a grudge are you carrying a hurt? Are you nursing an offense? And so when you start hearing this, maybe there's that brown noser at work, right? You're like, man. Or maybe your boss doesn't appreciate you, and you're like, if I just left, this place would fall apart. Or maybe your friend takes you for granted. Every time they call, they're always asking for something. They're always like, can you do this for me? Can you do this? Can you do that? Or maybe you're sick and tired of being criticized. Everything you do is always wrong. Maybe you're bitter at yourself. You're just mad at yourself. Why did I allow this to happen to me? Why did this go on? Why did this happen? Maybe you're just mad at yourself. Maybe you're disappointed and angry with God. Especially when you're looking at this and go, God, why am I in this situation? Why am I here? Why is this happening? Why is it that I'm going through this time in my life? Why is it that I'm broke at Christmas time? Why is it that I didn't plan for the same holiday that happens every 12 months on December 25th? I knew that it was coming, but I don't know. And see, the thing is, most of us, we have something that we're bitter about that we just are not willing to go ahead and pluck and take care of. We need to kill the root of it. We need to kill the root of that bitterness. How do you kill the root of bitterness? And so when you look at Ephesians 4 gives us, it says, get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ had forgave you. So here's the thing. We tend to see our anger. I got to share the story, I guess, a little bit about it before I dive into it. So most of us, we don't understand is that there's a time where Jesus gets angry in the Bible. And he comes in and he starts flipping over tables. And, we see that anger. See, most of us, we tend to see ourselves as Jesus coming in and flipping tables over. The problem is, most of us are actually on the other side of that table where the table's being flipped over onto. It's very hard to recognize ourselves as the money changer. It's very hard to see that happening where we're the money changer on that side, where Jesus is coming in with this righteousness and he's got this anger and he's flipping over tables. And we forget that he's forgiven us, that we've been forgiven, and he doesn't come in and he has no record of the wrongs. He has none of that stuff that's coming in, and he's compassionate. And there's always this forgiveness. And when somebody says sorry, it happens. See, the thing that happens, though, it has to be an authentic sorry. It has to be an authentic, I want to move forward. I want to move past this. I want to get rid of this. Because a lot of times people will say sorry just to get you to stop complaining. Instead of saying sorry and going, I actually want to make a change. And see, the bad part is that we've ingrained this into our families because this is what we teach our children. So our children, they will do something to their sibling, right? So his sibling will come up and they'll go, I'm not sharing. I'm taking my toy and going away. And then what you do as a parent, you'll go, no, you're going to share. Now tell your sibling sorry. So we've taught them right from the beginning to lie, especially with that word sorry. So we've raised them going, you know what? Just go tell them sorry. Go tell them sorry. Go say I'm sorry. And so what they've looked at is that word all of a sudden has no significance anymore. That word means nothing. You know, that word all of a sudden is just another word that's in the dictionary to use in order to get what you're actually after in any relationship. I'm sorry, now please give me the cookie. I'm sorry, now please give me my half of whatever that is. I'm sorry, now please let me have intimate time with you in a relationship. I'm sorry, please let this happen. I'm sorry, please keep me on my job. I'm sorry, this is what's happened. Instead of actually getting to the root of this and going, I'm sorry, I'm going to change. I'm sorry, things will be different. I'm sorry that we're going to change this and it won't happen anymore. I'm sorry, I'm actually going to make an authentic change in my life in order to make it to where we move forward and not have that same conversation again and again and again. We don't teach that to our children. We've just taught them that word, just throw it around. And see, see, the problem is, that word has become the adjective, it has become this action instead of the actual action. So we've told them, go say sorry, rather than say, you need to go have compassion. You need to go actually make a change, go do something different. And so the easiest way to put a kill to this root and to move forward is to kill that bitterness with compassion. Kill bitterness with compassion. So you can tell them, I'm sorry. See, when Paul's writing this to the church in Ephesus, he's giving them this direct teaching. This is direct teaching to those that are in Ephesus at this point. And he says, be kind and compassionate to one another. Be kind and compassionate. Don't say, I'm sorry. Be kind and compassionate. Don't go, I'm sorry, and then go, oh, we're going to move on. No. Be kind and compassionate. Give. Be willing to give up. Be willing to do something different. See, and Paul tells us in Romans 12:21, he gives a simple thing. He says the same. He says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Amen. So, remember what I told you at the beginning of this. You can't control what someone else said. You can control what you respond, right? You can't control what somebody else does. You can control how you respond. Well, how are we responding? What are we doing? And how are we teaching our children to respond? How are we teaching people around us to respond? I'll give you. So I had a heart change. Okay, so I want to tell you guys something. Is that one? I was a little heathen as a kid. And heathen might be an understatement. So I was very, very difficult to deal with. And the police told my mom one time, they were like, just handcuff him to the bed. And I'm telling you, that's what the sheriff's department said. So often they were responding to the destruction and the malice that I had behind. And they were like, we have to do something about it. One time, a buddy of mine, we won't use names to protect the person from getting arrested again. And so one time, a friend of mine calls me and he says, hey, I'm stealing my dad's car. I'll be at your house in 30 seconds. And I said, hey, there's school. And he goes, guess we're not going. And I said, guess we're not. And so he showed up, literally pulls into my driveway. And so he'd never driven a stick shift before. And so he pulls into my driveway at my house, and when he pulls into the driveway, it looks like one of those scenes where like he almost drives into the house because he has no idea what he's doing. And so I make the executive decision at that point. I go, I'm driving. That's what's happening now. So I get into the driver's seat, he gets in the passenger seat, and we go and we decide we're going to go take the tour of the Greater Bay Area. So we start going for a drive. We had no real intention. We had no money. We had no idea what we were going to do for bridges that we were crossing because we crossed them. We had no idea, so we just blew through tolls, but this was before Fast Track where you could blow through and get a bill in the mail. So this one, we blew through where the guy was standing there waiting for the money, so that leads to somebody calling the police at some point, right? That happens. And so we're on Highway 4 going from Martinez back to the Pinole area. And as we come around the bend on Highway 4, all of a sudden we look in the rearview mirror. I look in the rearview mirror, and there's 4 cop cars behind us. And I'm 14. I want to kind of give you that idea too. So we're joyriding. I'm a 14-year-old, and so the cops. We pull over. We're not trying to be. We're not Thelma and Louise in it, and. So we pull over, and as we're pulling over, I'm terrified, and so I drive up onto the embankment, up the hill, and slide back down. It was quite interesting. And the cop came up to the side of the car. He looks inside of the car, and he says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "I don't know, because I look like a 12-year-old driving this car." I said, "Maybe that's the start." He's all, "Well, you've been speeding. You've been doing 105. He's all, "You've blown through 4 bridge tolls." And I said, "I think it's only been 3." And I said, and he goes, "And the car has been reported stolen." And I said, "Huh, yeah, I guess that's I guess that's a good reason to pull us over." And so he asked me and my friend to get out of the car. And at this point, I was fully expecting to be placed in handcuffs and go to jail. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't, and granted, I think that he looked at this, and I think he looked at the 2 of us, and he goes, "Something different can happen here." And so what he does is that he puts us in the back of the car. He doesn't handcuff us, puts us in the back of the car, and he takes us into Martinez, and he takes us over to the Wendy's, and he buys us lunch, and he sits down, and he conversates with us. And at the end of that conversation, he takes me home, and he sits down, and he talks with my mom, and he goes, "Your son can go away for a little bit of time." He's all, "But I see something in him that he's going to do something amazing if we guide him and give him direction and we show love and compassion." Those are the exact words that he used. And my mom didn't take that in, right? My mom was like, "Yeah, whatever, I got to go to work in 4 hours. Either take him to jail or whatever." But for me, it's a story, it's something that's sunk into me. Now, I didn't change my ways at that point, all of a sudden be like, "Ooh, I'm perfect now." That didn't happen. In fact, I got in a whole lot more trouble. But that moment, there was a seed that was planted. And instead of him taking me to jail, instead of him doing those things, what he did was he made it to where I show compassion and kindness. And so if you know my wife and I, generally, we give everything. So when we get a new car, we usually give the car away that we've been driving. We usually give it to somebody, or we sell it. We're always about, "Here, we don't need this anymore. You take it. Here, this is." And so it's created for us where I was stealing cars, now I give them away. Here, and so it's one of those things that you can look at this and go, "How is it? What am I doing, and what sort of compassion, and how am I doing this, and how have I had true?" Like he could have took me to jail. He didn't have to go buy me lunch. He didn't have to go drive me out. He literally drove me 40 miles home. He didn't have to do those things. See, the problem is that when we look at people, we always are easy for us to point out the worst features of them or the worst things that they've done instead of seeing the absolute best in them and seeing what God sees in us. We always see the negative, and we always see we're like, "Oh, that they suck. They have this, they have that." Instead of looking at them and going, "Man, I see God's child. I see God's precious son or daughter. I see my brother and sister in Christ, and I'm going to show them compassion and love." And when somebody makes a mistake, instead of going, "You go say sorry," I'm actually going to spend time with them and go, "Hey, look, let's sit down and let's talk about it." Now, you can't do that with your 3-year-old, but you can do it with your older kids. You can go, "I need to show them compassion. I need to show them what it looks like." Because our first response usually is to just beat them silly. And sometimes that works, but a lot of times that creates animosity, creates anger. But we also do that with other people around us, right? We do that with people that, anybody around us or any of those things, we do it with those other people. Here's what Jesus says. Jesus actually says it best. He says, "Bless those who curse you." He says, "And pray for those who mistreat you." So when we have those mistreatments, what do? Do we actually bless them? I've given you guys the perfect line. When somebody comes up and says something offensive to you, you should say it. I'm just telling you. They will never, ever say it again. Because if you just go, "Forgive them, Father, for they know what they do." They know not what they do, right? "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they've done." Do you know they will never come talk to you again? And so Or they're going to speak to you in such a different tone, you're going to be like, oh, that's a different person. But are you praying for people? When people offend you, do you pray for them? Do you encourage them? Do you go, I want the best for you? Or do you go, I hate that person? One of the best things you can do is when somebody hurts you is to pray for them. That's one of the best things that you can do. It's the easiest way to start forgiveness as well. See, your prayer for others may not change them, but it'll always change you. So your prayer for others won't change them, but it'll change you. It always changes you. So we kill bitterness with compassion, and we kill bitterness with forgiveness. So I want to tell you something. This is where it's going to get a little tough for some of us, right? Because some of you guys are going, you have no idea what they did, or how they did this, or what they've done to me. You don't have any idea, Mike, on why this has happened, or and how do I forgive somebody who's done the unforgivable? How do I forgive that person? And see, in Paul, he says, get rid of all bitterness. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Forgive each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you. How do you forgive? Just like Jesus forgave. That's how you forgive. And how did he forgive? He forgave freely and generously and absolutely and entirely. There wasn't one of those things, I forgive you all but this 1%. It's entirely, and it's unconditional. That's how we forgive. We forgive freely, generously, absolutely, entirely, and unconditionally, just like he did to us. Now, what does that do for us? It allows us to move forward. It allows us not to have to continue to live in the situation or wherever we're at. It allows us to do what God has asked us to do. Don't let a root of bitterness grow up and become this weed of evilness, because that's what it ends up doing. You know, anybody ever had a plate, something you broke? Right? Like at our house, we have kids, so our kids are always breaking something, or we break something. We drop glasses, stuff like that. Something gets knocked off the counter, it breaks, right? What do we do with it? You don't try and pick it up and go, you know what? I think I'm going to eat off of half of this. I don't think that I'm going to try and maintain. You let it go. You get rid of it. You're like, I'm not going to sit, a broken plate, you're not going to hold on to it. You're like, oh, it's such a beautiful plate. No, it's broken. You have to let it go. If you can't mend it, then you have to forgive and let go of it. You just can't keep going, I'm going to, and it's like what we want to do is like we want to relive the situation. We want to rehearse it. Like, this is what happened. It broke. It fell off. And then it really, you need to release it. It's really what needs to happen. Excuse me. So a lot of times what we don't understand is when we forgive, it's like setting a prisoner free. The problem is, for the longest time, we have been the prisoner. When we forgive, we actually set ourselves free. We are the ones, because we're not hanging on to it. I've used this story in the past, and a lot of times I tell it probably wrong, but I'm going to use it again because there's something to this, is that there's two monks that are traveling down a road, and monks generally don't talk, and they definitely don't touch women, right? And when they do talk, it's usually only to other monks. And so as they're traveling down this road, they come to a lady who's at a river, waiting to cross that river. She's standing at the river and she's waiting to cross it, and she's got, and so we just think back, go 100 years back or whatever, and so they didn't have a bridge, they didn't have any of those things, and she's wearing a dress. And so the one monk sees that she needs help across the river. It's different for a guy to get all wet and, and everything, but for a woman, and so what he does is he steps outside and he picks her up and he carries her across the water. And the other monk, all of a sudden, starts to get upset about it. You can physically see, you ever seen what happens to somebody when they see something that somebody else has done and they get upset about it? Like, physically changes them. Like their appearance changed. All of a sudden they went from being, hey, let's be happy and joyful, all of a sudden they're like, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with her? What's wrong with him? And instead of being joyful, they've gotten to this point where they're sharing anger over something they didn't even have anything to do with. And so 5 miles later down the road, The monk that carried the woman across the water looks at the other monk and goes, what are you upset about? What's going on? What's happened? I can physically tell that you're different. And the one monk goes, I can't believe that you picked up that woman and carried her across the river. And he goes, dude, that happened 5 miles ago. Why are we still talking about it now? Why haven't you moved on? For us, we take that offense and we don't move on, and the only person that's actually hurting is you. It's not actually hurting the person that you offended, or that offended you. They've already moved past it. They're like, I don't even know that I offended you, because the one monk didn't have any idea that there was an offense that occurred. And so when we get to this point, you go miles later, years later, decades later, forgive me, guys, I'm a little sick. And he goes, and yet we're still angry about it. Do you think that the person who did the action is angry? They're not angry. They don't care. They've already moved on with their life. They're doing something else. It's only you that's angry and upset and bitter. You have to let it go and move on. And we get so caught up in it. See, I just told you this at the beginning of this. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. How are you responding to those that have done something? And how long have you been a prisoner of your own doing? How long have you been the one that's locked yourself up and you've just been the prisoner of your own doing? So here's the thing, is that bitterness is a dangerous root that creates and produces a poisonous fruit that kills compassion and kills forgiveness. That's what bitterness does. And you go, I'm not a bitter person. Well, how compassionate are you with others and how forgiving are you? It's the deepest statement that you can walk away from here today going, how compassionate and how forgiving am I? Because if you're neither one of those things, then you're bitter. And it makes it to where you're always going to have anger, you're always going to look at things and you're going to have that woe is me attitude rather than going, how do I move forward with what God asked me to do and with his forgiveness? And go, I just need to let this go. Ephesians 4:31. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgive each other just as Christ, God, forgave you. See, it really, here's the thing, as far as possible, live at peace. As far as possible, live at peace. You can't just keep going in this direction. You can't keep beating yourself up, and you can't keep just going, I'm going to do what I want to do, and just have all this destruction that's happening around you. Guys, I'm going to close in prayer here in a moment, and I hope that if you're a first-time guest here, you just hung out for our toy distribution at the end, and I hope that this message spoke to you and has resonated and maybe has even created this desire to know more. If it has, we'd love to have you join us here. Fill out the connection card that's inside of the bulletin, and we'd love to have you become part of the Edge family, but also we really would love to have this be what starts as a change in your life. And it may not be the Edge. You may be going, this dude takes the word and he turns it funny, and so we'll help you find a church. We'll do all that we can. But really what we want to see is we want to see this transformation that we know that happens with God when we start traveling lightly. When we start letting things go, when we start doing what he's asked us to do, when we start going the direction he's asked us to go, it's amazing on how that transformation happens. You can go from stealing cars to giving them away. You can go from carrying the burden of anger to having the joy of forgiveness. It's amazing what can happen when we go, God, you are in control, and I surrendered all to you. Well, I would challenge you today is that to take some steps and do something different, to live in a different direction, to try something that's a little different, and it's just to start digging out that root of bitterness and to move forward the way that God has asked you to. Ask him for forgiveness, and then start forgiving those around you. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for today, and thank you for just this group that you've assembled here today, and those that you've brought in to spend just a little bit of time with us. Whether that's a first-time guest, somebody here to pick up just toys to share with their family, or somebody here that just really needed this life-giving message, this word of just releasing and letting go of bitterness. Father, we ask that as you have forgiven us, that we forgive others, that we do it freely, and that it's unconditional, that we don't hold on to these things, that we move forward, that we don't put conditions upon our forgiveness. If they do this, I'll do this, or if this happens, I'll do this. We just want it to be just completely unconditional, and allow how we respond be the model, what people see, and they go, well, there is something different about them. Why do they respond this way? Why do they do these things? It's because they are the followers. They are the believers. Those are those Christians. They will know us by what we do, not by what we say. Father, let this be the first step that we start to take. This forgiveness, removing the root of bitterness, and finding harmony and joy and love with everybody that's around us. Father, thank you. Thank you again for today, and thank you for those that are here just spending this morning with us. It's in your Son, Jesus' name, that we pray. Amen. Kirk is going to lead us in our